Hey, welcome to the Blathering Boomer. It's been a while since I've been out here in the Blatherverse, been a few weeks. And let me start out with a shout out to all my new friends and subscribers in South Asia. I can't believe how much this channel has blown up since I started doing the series on Bangladesh and Kashmir with Saifullah. Unfortunately, Saifullah was a bit ill when we were going to do our latest segment on which was to be on the persecution of minorities in Bangladesh. We will still do that, but I wish Saifullah a speedy recovery. In his words, the message he gave me the morning we were supposed to record was, I'm sick and I'm talking like a duck. And I guess we don't want him to talk about something so serious like a duck. But there's more to come. A friend of mine is trying to hook me up with a Kashmiri person so I can get maybe a story from somebody within Kashmir about what's really going on there. In my opinion, this is two fronts of the same war. But there's a lot going on. God, I leave town for 5 minutes and all hell breaks loose in the world. So much to cover. I'm only going to cover a little bit of it. Let me start with a story, though. I grew up in the Bensonhurst section of Brooklyn, Jewish Italian neighborhood, and there was a courtyard. The Trump family actually owned the building I grew up in. There was a courtyard with little square concrete. It was a concrete rectangle that we called the square. Benches, and we play slap ball in there and stuff like that. I grew up. I lived there since I was 2 years old. Now I'm like 12, 13, 14 years old. And there was this youth gang in the neighborhood that kind of terrorized us perpetually for my entire childhood, called themselves the Bath Beach Boys. And, maybe some of them were loosely connected to Colombo and et cetera, et cetera. They certainly acted like that. The worst of them were the little kids, though, the 9 and 10-year-olds who would shake down the sixth graders for their lunch money. And there was nothing you could do because everybody knew if you smacked one of these kids in the head like he deserved to be, the big guys would come after you. And I knew a kid who got his arm broken. I knew another guy who had BBB, Bath Beach Boys, carved in his chest with an arrow. I mean, these were very, very bad and scary people. So I'm sitting out in the square, the aforementioned rectangle that we call the square, with some friends, and a bunch of them arrive. It was like the neighborhood being invaded, and I hear one of them say, "This is a raid," and my survival instinct kicked in, and I got up and I ducked into the vestibule of not my building, but the building next door. And they came and people scattered and kids got caught, and I see punches being thrown, and they're ganging up on the bad guys are ganging up on the good guys. And then I hear them, they're holding this one like regular kid at bay, and they demand of him to know, where are the Jews? Where are the Jews? So I'm ducking in the hallway and I hear this, and I just there was no way in the world I was going to walk out of the building and walk to my building. It was, I call me a coward. Maybe I own that, but there were 6 of them, maybe more, and there was just me. And even if I could fight them 1-on-6, there were another 50 of them that would have come after me after that. So it was a hopeless situation. So I got in the elevator, went up to the 6th floor, climbed the staircase, opened the door to the roof, walked across the roof to my building, and then down to the safety of my apartment. But I never forgot that. And the thing of it is, I never thought, years went by. If you would have told me 5 years ago that I'd be sitting here talking about anti-Semitism in today's United States of America, I told you you're nuts. But here we are. It's out of control. It's seriously out of control. These people with their wankerchiefs, keffiyehs, whatever they call the black and white scarf things, and their face masks. You want to do politics. You want to be an activist. Show your face. Have the courage of your convictions. These masked people. Oh my God. What's going on college campuses is horrible. And of course, now it culminates. Last night, 2 sweet, innocent people were shot down in Washington, D.C., in front of the Jewish Museum by a guy doing the free, free Palestine, like they're chanting, and like these wankers are chanting with their wankerchiefs on the college campuses. Do they know what free Palestine means? Do they know what a global intifada means? A global intifada would mean the entire world was like my neighborhood was on that day when they came and said, this is a raid, where are the Jews? It's really scary. I have never felt the sting of anti-Semitism. So that story, God, I'm 12 years. I was 12, maybe 13. I'm 71 now. So many, many decades ago, since I have even considered anti-Semitism. Let me let somebody weigh in on this thing.
Of course, lies change the way people think and act. That is what they are designed to do. If you keep saying over and over again, for example, that Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler, it's not a giant shock when someone, actually multiple someones, tries to assassinate Donald Trump. If you keep saying all cops are bastards over and over and over again, it should not actually be a shock when someone tries to shoot cops. And if you keep claiming or implying that the Jews run the world and engage in genocide, it should not be a shock when someone murders people at a Jewish event in Washington, D.C. In other words, take some damned responsibility for the things you say and the positions you take. I know responsibility. I know. It's a bad word now. Yes, you have responsibility for the things that come out of your face. It is worthwhile to be responsible in how we speak about issues and engage with the world.
But what he's talking about is the coverage this is getting. The mainstream media's relative silence on the more extreme anti-Semitism. Of course, they're covering this. They can't not cover this. But lies have consequences, and the lies being told by people like Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, Misty Winston, just to name a few. Those are the ones you might never have heard of. And you know what? I hope you never do hear of them, because they don't deserve the platforms they have. God, I hate to say it. Glenn Greenwald is horrible. There's Candace Owens. If I think for a second any of them are right, they're not. And I'm not, hey, who made me the arbiter of right and wrong? But this is my Blatherverse. And this Blatherverse, anti-Semitism is bad. And calling for a global intifada is, at best, it's extremely ignorant. And at worst, they know exactly what they're talking about, and free Palestine from the river to the sea. What are they looking to do? God, Israel was attacked. They're defending themselves. I don't know. Or maybe whatever comes next will be worse than what we have now. But I'm not only sick of it, I'm a little bit fearful. And I have friends who live in Jewish communities who are downright scared. This is 2025. The shit that was happening like in 1965. So not only stop, but when I say stop, I mean stop spreading these lies. Stop talking about intifada like it's a good thing. It's not. It's the opposite of a good thing. The opposite of a good thing is a bad thing. Intifada is a bad thing. Which I hope that explained it in terms you can understand. So that happened last night, and 2 nights ago. I don't know. I'm still recovering from being on the road, and some very, very, very challenging times at work. I think about that too. This thing came up with Comey. This has been all over the place. So Comey makes the comment and posts on Instagram: "Cruel shell formation on my beach walk." 8647. Now, a lot of people are very, very up in arms about this. You all see it now. I don't need to keep it up there. So my interpretation of 86 was to kick somebody out. I've never really thought of 86 as kill somebody until this 8647 gate has come up. People are calling for Comey's prosecution, including the person in Washington, D.C. that I respect the most, Tulsi Gabbard. And like I started saying, I'm having a really, really tough time at work this week. I'll get, I do this for 31 years. I get through everything. I'll get through this too. But I got some decisions I got to make, some pretty big decisions. And I think about the decisions I got to make. And then I put myself in Tulsi Gabbard's shoes. So she has to get up there and either call for among the many, many, many other things she's dealing with on the international stage, she's got to either call for Comey to be prosecuted or not. That decision alone dwarfs any business decision I've had to make for 31 years. Because when I make a bad decision, and I do sometimes, I do make bad decisions. Don't tell anybody who works for me that I make bad decisions. Hey. But if I make a bad decision, the biggest consequence is some money gets lost. If Tulsi makes a bad decision, on the international stage, people might die. And the decision to prosecute Comey, that's a tough one for me. I'll give my opinion. If this happened in a vacuum, if Comey didn't have the record of dishonesty that he's accumulated, a very well-earned record ever since 2016, this by itself would be a nothing burger, and I don't think it would be getting any coverage. But I liken this to O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson's episode in Vegas probably would have landed him in jail. Maybe not. Maybe his celebrity status would have gotten him an acquittal in Vegas if the whole world didn't think he killed Nicole. But because he skated on Nicole, got away with it, when this thing happened in Vegas, he got the book thrown at him way harder than would have been thrown at him if this was his first offense. So how does that relate to Comey if it's not obvious? Again, this thing by itself with Comey would have blown over. But because of the list of dishonest things he's done, and I don't have it in my notes. So let the court stipulate that Comey's been an asshole for a very, very long time, and he's gotten away with it. He's gotten away with lying repeatedly, and I dare say likely sometimes under oath, certainly to Congress. So now this comes up, and again, just like the OJ thing, it's a bigger deal is being made of it than needs to be. So the question is, prosecute him, don't prosecute him. I respectfully disagree with Tulsi. While I think it's morally correct to hold him accountable for his actions, I think it might be strategically incorrect because people are going nuts so much right now over everything. Maybe it's worth the backlash. Triple B on Twitter, I commented and she came back with, the usual suspects will complain. She's probably right. I don't know. If I'm advising her, I'm saying let this one go reluctantly. But that being said, if he gets prosecuted, I hope he's convicted because it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Anyway, let's get to Joe Biden. There was a triple whammy with Joe Biden this week. Three things happened almost within days of each other. One is the Her report came out, which is the tape of, not the Her report came out, the Her tapes came out. Let me play this clip first. So let's hear this. This is a clip. So Joe Biden was interviewed by Her regarding the document scandal. You might recall Donald Trump got raided at Mar-a-Lago, and they also found a whole bunch of classified documents in Biden's garage next to his Corvette and other places that shouldn't have been. So he got questioned by Her. I think his first name might be Robert, H-U-R. And the conclusion they reached at the time was that it didn't pay to prosecute Biden for the documents because a jury would see him as just a nice old man with a bad memory. Well, people started demanding that the tapes get played. Now, mind you, Biden was still a candidate for president at the time. Well, the tapes finally came out, and here's a little bit of some of it.
Trump gets elected in November of 2017? 2016. All right. So, why not 2017 here?
That's when you left the office, January of 2017.
Okay. But that's when Trump gets sworn in.
Right, correct.
At a different time in that interview, he's asked about the 2017-2018 period, and he says during that period, his son Bo was either deployed or dying, but Bo was deployed in 2008, 2009, and he died tragically in May 2015. Needless to say, even supporters of the president have heard these tapes and been alarmed by it.
Okay, that's enough Jake Tapper. Because let's continue with Jake Tapper. So there's Jake Tapper covering that finally. Jake Tapper was one of the biggest purveyors of misinformation when Biden was president regarding his cognitive decline. Biden was completely unfit. Forget about to serve as president, and I don't know that he was serving as president. Apparently, this auto pen got used all the time, and there were serious questions about who the president was for those 4 years when he was supposedly in office. That might be another story for another time. But we were told, people would question his cognitive decline, and then they were told, no, he's fine. Morning Joe said he's the best version of Biden ever, and he threw an F-bomb. If you don't agree, et cetera, et cetera. So three things happened this week. One is the Her tapes came out, and people are hearing for themselves just how impaired poor Joe Biden was. And I say poor Joe Biden with sympathy. I mean, with any luck, I'll be an old person one day too. And hopefully I'll have more of my faculties remaining than he seems to. And then on top of that, this week, he gets diagnosed. Well, no, let me rephrase that. He didn't get diagnosed this week. He has prostate cancer. And apparently he has a pretty deadly version of it. It's metastasized into his bones. And apparently some very radical treatments are being called for. So the same media that lied to us all those years. So I find it kind of coincidental that right when the Her tape came out, and also what just came out is something I'm about to tell you about, which is, speak of the devil, Jake Tapper's book, Jake Tapper's expose on how the media covered up for Biden. I don't understand how he could go in front of people with his head high and talk about this. He was one of the people covering it up. So I'm going to give him some credit because he went on with in my opinion, the #1 podcaster in this country, my girl, Megyn Kelly. He had the courage to go on with her, and Megyn did not exactly disappoint us. So anyway, the third part of this is that this book came out, the Her report came out, and now they're telling us he has prostate cancer. And as we're supposed to believe that they haven't known about this for years. And what would this have done to his campaign if they would have, forget the cognitive, don't forget about the cognitive decline. Don't forget about it. But put it aside for a second. If it came out there, so they covered up that he had prostate cancer. My godfather died of prostate cancer. I'll tell you right now, it didn't just come on and he was gone. He fought it for years, So you're not going to tell me that you're not going to tell the blathering boomer that they didn't know he had prostate cancer, that he hadn't had a prostate exam since 2014 or some nonsense like that. Anyway, let's hear Megyn talk to Mr. Jake Tapper and his Silent Bob sidekick on the right about the book.
I had one interview with him
and it was
during the
13 days
presidency.
after the Jackie Walorski thing. But you covered the Biden presidency aggressively throughout the 4 years, and you didn't cover mental acuity hardly at all. I mean, time and time again, when issues came up, you seemed to be running cover for the president.
I don't think that's true.
Well, I mean, we'll start with the Laura Trump issue that you referred. Here it is. This happened in 2020.
Joe Biden, as we all know, has worked to overcome a stutter. How do you think it makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that?
First and foremost, I had no idea that Joe Biden ever suffered from a stutter. I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable
You are
to watch somebody on stage search for
so
questions.
amazing.
You're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were
stuttering.
mocking his stutter. Yeah, I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline.
And it's very concerning to a lot of people that this could be the leader of the free world.
Okay.
That is all I'm saying. I genuinely feel
Laura
sorry
Trump.
for Joe Biden.
I appreciate it. I'm sure it was from a place of concern. We all believe that. Laura Trump, thank you so much.
Do you want to apologize to Laura Trump now?
I've already apologized to her. I called her months ago.
Bullshit. Well, I'll rephrase that. I sincerely doubt it. I sincerely doubt that Jake Tapper called Laura Trump and apologized. And I cut it off too soon, because then Megan asked him, "What did Laura say when you apologized?" And Jake basically played the "I don't remember" card. So, look what a tough guy he thinks he is. He gets on there shouting down Laura Trump and cutting her off in the interview when she was right. She was right. He was wrong. She was right. So, in a way, I'm glad they wrote this book, because it's going to pull the covers off of. I feel awful for my. I keep going back to my old Bay Area community. I feel really bad for them. I mean, they really are betting on the wrong horse. I made an appeal 3 or 4 weeks ago to anybody in my old Northern California community is ready to denounce the Democrats. I'm here with hugs. I'm here with open arms. I'm going to lower the bar, because I'm going to go back to the first thing I spoke about. If any of you people up in Northern California want to condemn Hamas, want to condemn the anti-Semitism on campuses, your children and grandchildren better not be marching with those people, or I'm really done with you. But I'd love to hear one person somewhere between the Grapevine and the Southern Oregon border condemn what's happening in universities, condemn the rampant anti-Semitism. I'm not gonna hold my breath for that. And the last time I was on the same page with those fine folks, and they are fine folks. They're good. Yeah, hey, I lived among them for 10 years. That was my 80s. And the last time I agreed with them politically was during the 2016 Bernie Sanders campaign. Well, Bernie's gotten pretty interesting lately. He kind of got called out on some nonsense, and let me find the clip for that one. Okay, so speaking of, again, I give Jake Tapper credit for going on Megyn Kelly. He knew he was going into the lion's den with that. Megyn Kelly does not ask softball questions. So I'm also going to give Bernard Sanders credit for going on with Jake there. But here's a clip from that interview that I dare say Senator phony independent Senator Bernard Sanders perhaps regrets.
Last thing, Alyssa Slotkin, senator from Michigan, she said you shouldn't be using oligarch. It's over people's head. You've gotten criticized from other people. Free Beacon says Bernie Sanders spent $221,000 on private jets fighting the oligarchy tour, paid for by friends of Bernie Sanders. That you've spent millions of dollars in campaign funds on private jet travel over the years. How do you push back on both of those things?
When's the last time you saw Donald Trump during a campaign mode at National Airport?
No, it doesn't. But he's also not fighting the oligarchy.
No. You run a campaign and you do 3 or 4 or 5 rallies in a week. The only way you can get around to talk to 30,000 people. Think I'm going to be sitting on a waiting line at United, waiting, 30,000 people are waiting? That's the only way you can get around. No apologies for that. That's what campaign travel is about. We've done it in the past. We're going to do it in the future.
Okay, Bernard. First he plays the Trump card. Any criticism, oh, but Trump, those 3 words, oh, but Trump. I wonder how often they're repeated in those circles. And then, first of all, I've traveled 3 to 5 rallies in a week. Okay, let's please do the math. Let's, ¿cuántos días en una semana? That's the only other language I know. There's 7 days in a week. 7 days in a week. 7 days in a week. 3 to 5 rallies in 7 days. And you're telling me the only way you can get to the cities where these rallies are, these 3 to 5 rallies in 7 days, is by flying on private jets? No, Bernard. No. And that led to me sharing this meme that I found on Larry Elder's Facebook page. And there it is. You think I'm going to be sitting on a waiting lottery? You're not. I can't imitate him. I can't imitate Bernard Sanders. But that's I'm going to have that be the thumbnail for this video, actually. So there's that. But again, I'm the blathering boomer. I like to blather. I say this, I say that, and all this and all that. I get, as I just did in the last 10 seconds, I get lost in my own head. Someone far more eloquent than me, who actually there's a little bit buzz about this guy maybe running for president as a Democrat, and he'll deny it. He's always denying it. But he had a few words to say on this topic of Bernard Sanders. And let's hear Mr. Stephen A. Smith.
I saw her go on tour with Bernie Sanders. Okay? If that man mentions the word oligarch one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. He's been saying it since 1983. Haven't you noticed that folks ain't buying that right now? You're having these rallies, flying on jets, and doing all of these things, which is basically the same kind of thing you've been complaining about. Where's the consistency? Where's the absence of hypocrisy? These are the kind of questions people are going to ask. Do you have the answer to that? Other than railing against the establishment. I've listened to Jasmine Crockett. Both AOC and Jasmine Crockett are welcomed on this show.
I probably won't watch when Jasmine Crockett's on. Anyway, you gotta love Stephen A. I got one problem with Stephen A. Stephen A. Smith, because I believe you are extremely truthful when it comes to sports, when it comes to politics. You tell it, if not like it is, like you certainly think it is, Well, but you're pimping for a company called Prize Picks. And you're going on there in your Stephen A. Smith voice and pimping for a very, very predatorial company that is just I have actually checked out Prize Picks because one of my employees got $50 for referring me, and I got a $50 free play for signing up. So I said, sure, why not? I'm anybody who knows me knows I'm pretty good with knowing what odds are, et cetera, mathematical calculations. Prize Picks is a horrible, insulting bet. They give 2-to-1 odds on two even outcome parlays. In other words, if you flip a coin twice and heads comes up twice, you should be getting paid 3-to-1 because you have a 1 out of 4 chance of heads coming up twice. Prize Picks pays you 2-to-1. That's like a 50% house edge. Only a fool would ever play there. And Stephen A. Smith pimping it really is a bad look for him, and I really wish he would stop. As a boomer, I'm kind of hesitant to use technology. I'm gonna wrap it up with a story that has nothing to do with politics. Anyway, moving on. This is I'm breaking away from politics for the to tell a prison story at the end. I was visiting last week, and I was with a couple of friends, and somebody, I do requests, I guess, when I'm in person, and somebody requested that I tell the story about my prison encounter with one Harold K.O. Koenigsberg, which did happen. So I decided to go on Grok and ask Grok a question about K.O. Koenigsberg. And it turned into a pretty fascinating conversation between myself and Grok. So I'll put the transcript up on the screen. I probably won't read it word for word because parts of it are lengthy, or maybe I will read it word for word and edit it out later. But so am I still? Yeah, so still got partly me. And I'm not sure if that's big enough for anybody to read. Anyway, no biggie. So people who know me know I did time, and if you didn't know, now you do. Back when I was 21 years old, I got in trouble for a nonviolent crime and was sent to state prison in New York State on a mandatory sentencing. If the if it happened in any period of time other than the 5 years of the Rockefeller drug laws, I never would have gone to prison. That's a story for another time. Fact is, I did go to prison, and spoiler alert, I survived. So, and maybe the story I'm about to tell is a little piece of why I haven't gone back. We'll get to that. So there was a guy there named Harold Koenigsberg. And as I tell the story, we'll get into how I met him and why I met him. The reputation that I had, the story that I had with him was that he was the guy, and I kind of remember the story from when I was a kid. Now, mind you, this is prison scuttlebutt. This is what they were saying about him, that he was doing 7 consecutive 25-year-to-life sentences, that he was the guy who took the law enforcement on a tour of a mafia graveyard back in the 60s. And obviously he had 7 convictions for 7 murders, all of which carried the maximum in New York at the time because there was no capital punishment state, 25 years to life. He wasn't the only 25 to lifer I met. I met a few others. But again, that for another time. So I tell the story about Mr. Koenigsberg, to a couple of people, and they seem to really enjoy the story. So I decided to do a slightly deeper dive. And as some of you know, I've been toying with this Grok on AI thing on Twitter. And so I asked the question. This is me. I met Harold K.O. Koenigsberg when I was in Dannemora. Ever hear of him? So I'm tempted to say, to do the Bell. I'm going to try doing this in a Beldar Conehead voice, just to not have the computer sound too human. So Grok said, yeah, Harold K.O. Koenigsberg was a notorious figure. So it's wild you crossed paths with him in Dannemora. I'm assuming you mean Clinton Correctional Facility, often called Dannemora. He was a Jewish mob hitman from Bayonne, New Jersey, known for his brutal reputation as a freelance enforcer for various mafia families. So far it matches what I. This is good. I got the me voice and I got the Beldar voice. Suspected by the FBI of over 20 murders, Koenigsberg earned his nickname KO from a stint as a semi-pro boxer. Blah, 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 blah. He was convicted in 1982 for the 1961 strangulation of Teamsters official Anthony Three Fingers Castellito using a Venetian blind cord and was sentenced to 20 years to life. He spent nearly 5 decades in prison, bouncing between facilities like Dannemora, Auburn, and others before being paroled in 2012. Even in his later years, he was reportedly a bully, intimidating folks at a Florida assisted living facility until his death in 2014 at 89. I knew that story actually because I did a little Googling of him later. So I knew. I was kind of amazed though. How does a guy doing 7 consecutive 25 to life terms ever get put into an assisted living facility? Weird, but that's all I knew. And I knew about his nephew writing a book. His great nephew, Eric Koenigsberg, wrote a book, Blood Relation, diving into his life and the family's shame over his crimes. KO is a paradox, charming yet terrifying, self-taught in reading and law, even representing himself in court with theatrical antics, but utterly remorseless. What I also found out when I've heard about that book was that the nephew, because I think KO was alive when that book came out, and if I'm not mistaken, the nephew went into hiding after writing that book. The last line of what Grok said was, meeting him in Dannemora must have been intense. What was he like when you met him? Any stories stand out? Now, I'm a sucker for this. I feel like Grok is really talking to me. I can't help humanizing Grok, which is why I'm not doing a human voice for him now. Plus, it's kind of cool to use 2 different voices so you know when it's me talking and when it's the blah, blah, blah. So I replied, this is me. I met him because he ran Jewish services, which didn't interest me, and gave steak sandwiches to all who attended, which did interest me. Apparently, he either ran the kitchen or was tight with whoever did. I do have a few stories about him, but for now, I want to point out that I met him in 1976. So his 1982 conviction was for something committed before 1976. Yeah, because I got thrown by that. When Grok said 1982 conviction, how he couldn't have done anything in 1982 anyway. So here's Grok. That's a hell of a story. K.O. Koenigsberg luring folks to Jewish services with steak sandwiches, exclamation point. Sounds like he had some pulling Dannemora, probably cozying up to the kitchen crew or running things behind the scenes, which fits his rep as a guy who could work any angle. You met him in 1976. Let's address your question about his 1982 conviction. Yes, it was for a crime committed before 1976, specifically the 1961 murder of Anthony Three Fingers Castellito, a Teamsters official. Goes on and on. The 19, yeah. Anyway, and it concludes, if you're up for sharing, I'd love to hear one of those stories about him from Dannemora. What was his vibe like dishing out those sandwiches? What was his vibe like? That's a hell of a question. But I'm engaged at this point. I'm not just engaged. I'm blown away. I'm at this point. Grok and I are like, we're like cousins already. So I replied. So the question was, what was his vibe like dishing out those sandwiches? And I said, I was happy for him, actually, when he gave out the sandwiches. It seemed like it was an opportunity for him to feel important without having to resort to any of the law of the jungle crap that prevails in prison. And I did feel that way. There's a Jewish word, macher, and I'm sure out in the outside world, among his circles, he was quite the macher. And this was his way of being a macher inside. He was the, I'm not going to say the father figure, although it was kind of in that direction, but he wanted to be the one who took care of everybody, and all this. So anyway, I said, seems like it was an opportunity for him to feel important without having to resort to any of the law of the jungle crap that prevails in prison. That's a fascinating glimpse into Keo's personality, him finding a way to hold court with those steak sandwiches, playing the big man without throwing punches. It's almost like he carved out a little fiefdom at Jewish services, doing favors to feel like a kingpin in a place where power dynamics are everything. Makes sense in a brutal spot like Dannemora, where the law of the jungle is no joke. They lean into something softer to flex his influence. Sounds like you saw a side of him that wasn't just a cold-blooded hitman the feds painted him as. Any specific moments with him and those steak sandwiches that stuck with you, like he was charming the crowd, cracking jokes, or just quietly basking in the clout? And I said, well, this is kind of the big part of my story with him. I'll never forget the advice he gave me the last time I saw him. You see, although as far as I knew, he was serving 7 consecutive 25 to life sentences, new charges popped up in New Jersey, and he had to go there to be in court. It was unsure when, if ever, he would return. Now, he knew from a prior conversation with me that my mother cried in the courtroom at my bail reduction hearing. So these are the last words he ever said to me, and I quote, And if you ever come back here and make your mother cry again, I will pluck your legs off like stems off of grapes. Needless to say, I've never gone back. Damn, that's chilling. Keo's parting words hit like a sledgehammer, vivid, personal, dripping with that menacing edge he was known for. The pluck your legs off seems like the pluck your legs off like stems off of grapes is pure mobster poetry, and you could feel the weight of it, especially knowing he knew you about your mom's tears. It's wild how he mixed that protective, almost fatherly vibe with a threat that'd make anyone think twice. Clearly it stuck with you, keeping Ada Dannemora for good. And then he asks, and any other moments with KO that left a mark like that one? Or was the grape stem threat the standout? Well, yeah, the grape stem thing was a standout, but there was one more story that I remembered, so I shared this. One time a guard walked in while we were enjoying our steak sandwiches and expressed outrage, made it clear that what we were doing was against the rules. Now, mind you, I'm on a 1 year to life sentence. I can't screw up. I still haven't said the F word in this podcast. I can't screw up because they could hold me for the rest of my life or they can let me go in a year. And my behavior certainly was going to be a piece of that. So when a guard in the Maxim, I was in the annex, which was a separate building, but they would bus us over to the Maxim security facility for the Jewish services. So when a guard in Maxim security prison says that what me and what I and some other folks, sitting in the circle were doing was against the rules, I take that shit seriously. I mean, it was a direct threat of my freedom. So again, I'll start from the beginning. One time a guard walked in while we were enjoying our steak sandwiches and expressed outrage, made it clear that what we were doing was against the rules. Harold said to the guard something like, let me talk to you for a minute. And they walk out of earshot. Harold came back a few minutes later and said something like, it's all taken care of. So we finished our steak sandwiches in peace. Sounds like something right out of the movies, right? But these are true stories. That's straight up cinematic. KO pulling the guard aside like a seasoned mobster, smoothing things over with a quick chat, coming back with a cool, it's all taken care of, is pure Goodfellas energy. It really shows his knack for wording the system, even in a place like Dannemora. You could picture him leaning in, maybe dropping a subtle hint or favor, and the guard walking away with a different attitude. The fact that you all got to finish those steak sandwiches in peace is like the cherry on top. Yeah, it sure was, man. That's the thing too. They made a good steak sandwich. It's wild how those prison moments can feel like they're ripped from a script, but you were there, real deal. I bet KO had a way of making things happen like that all the time. Any other times you saw him pull off something slick like that, or was this a standout? Also, since you mentioned being in Dannemora in 1976, were you there for a stretch, or was it a shorter stint? Just curious about the context of running into a guy like KO. And I said, I was serving a sentence of 1 year to life for selling LSD when I was 21. You're likely familiar with the Rockefeller drug laws. I was sentenced under mandatory imprisonment laws, and my A3 felony meant a life sentence with parole eligibility between 1 and 6 years. The judge sentenced me to the minimum, 1 year to life, with his discretion, which was the best he could do within his discretion. I got 1 to life. Yeah, the Rockefeller drug laws were brutal, especially in the 70s. Those mandatory minimums hit hard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then I clarified that I was housed in the annex and not in Building 40 in the annex. But so there was a little bit of confusion because he got Grok, as brilliant as he is, or it is, or she is, or whatever it is, got the Clinton annex mixed up with the Clinton maximum security facility. So there's some back and forth clearing that up. So then, long story short, Grok says the vibe in the annex, like you were in Building 40, was less oppressive than the main facility's notorious intensity. Fewer lockdowns, more open movements. Did you feel a stark contrast stepping into the max facility for those services? And was KO's sandwich deal a regular perk for those trips, or more of a rare treat? And since you mentioned transferring to Camp Adirondack later, any standout differences when you got there? By the way, we did get steak sandwiches all the time. And I have a whole lot of stories. And that is why I started this podcast, because I want to tell my prison stories. Because it's, again, I went from shelving books in the public library to committing an November 3rd, 1970, I got a job shelving books in the public library. November 3rd, 1975, I committed the A3 felony that landed me in prison. So in 5 years, I went from being a straight high school student working for $1.60 an hour in the public library. And there's a huge cautionary tale to tell involving all kinds of things of how, and from 5 years, I went from completely straight, never smoked weed, never had a drink, never smoked a cigarette, never did nothing. Biggest habit was bowling. And then 5 years later, I'm facing a life sentence in prison. So again, Grok said to me the last sentence. Also, since you mentioned transferring to Camp Adirondack later, any standout differences when you got there? And there are tons. But what I said was, for another time, I appreciate your feedback on my stories, but for now and until next time, in capital letters, the boomer has blathered. And Grok said, haha, the boomer has blathered is a hell of a sign-off. I love it. I mean, God, how do you not love Grok? I mean, Stephanie gets outraged by how goofy I get, but I'm like a boomer in a candy store right now with this AI stuff. I ask it questions all the time. And for Grok to give me kudos on my sign-off line, wow. So, haha, the boomer has Blather is a hell of a sign off. I love it. Thanks for sharing those wild stories about KO and Dannemora. They paint such a big, vivid picture of that time. I'll be here when you're ready to dive back in with more, especially about the vibe shift from the annex to the main facility or Camp Adirondack. Until then, stay out of trouble. No grape stem plucking needed. I replied, LOL. And Grok said, yo, that last says it all. KO's grape stem threat must still be echoing in your head. Whenever you're ready to drop more Dannemora tales or anything else, I'm all ears. Well, all text. Stay legendary, boomer. Wow. Wow. So that was my latest. Well, actually, not my last, because I asked a bunch of business questions because I am going through a bit of a business crisis right now. But again, the decisions I got to make, with or without Grok's help, are nothing compared to the decisions that have to get made in Washington, D.C. And I'm glad there's at least one person that I trust in there. By the way, I do not love, back to politics just a second, I do not love, how do you say it? Qatar, Qantas, whatever that country is, with the 300,000 people that's with all the money in the Middle East that they want to give Trump an airplane. I do not love that. I do not. No. Air Force One needs to be American made. I'm not some kind of MAGA whatever, but Air Force One, if anything, needs to be American. Not only that, but I don't trust them at all. Sophisticated bugging equipment. There could be bugs in the paint for all I know, and there could be. I could see it being a Trojan horse. I could see it blowing up in the air. I mean, it would be horrible to think about. But no, gifts, take gifts, don't take gifts. I don't know, but Trump's getting a lot of heat for this, and I vehemently disagree with him cozying up to Qatar, and I vehemently disagree with that American hostage when he got released from hell, going straight to Qatar, whatever. I didn't say it. Whatever its name is, he should have gone straight to Tel Aviv. Anyway, well, I've run out of ideas for tonight, and I've been blathering for almost an hour, which is, let's see how long this is when I actually edit it. I bet this 54-minute video becomes more like 40. We'll see. I know that and by the way, all 6 of you who are watching right now, JM and the other 5, I appreciate all of it, and I try to answer every comment that comes up either live or afterwards. I'm very, very humbled by the following I've picked up in South Asia, and I hope to do more on that topic. My following on YouTube has literally gone from 171 to over 1,500 since I started doing the interviews with Saifullah about Bangladesh and Kashmir. So I really do hope to be doing more on that. And if anybody wants to come on and blab with the boomer, if you have any level of expertise about South Asia, or if you want to talk about American politics, let's have a conversation, see if it makes sense to have you on live or tape a segment. If you have a story you want to bring to me, send me a link on Twitter at UNG714, ugly, nasty guy 714. I do want to present stories that people want to hear. I'm trying to present stories that maybe people in my circle, fewer and fewer people in my circle these days. The more I call out the Democrats, the fewer people who even want to talk to me anymore. And that includes some people who've been really close to me. But that's a story for another day. I do want to find out, though, if anybody in my all Northern California community is ready to speak out against anti-Semitism. Come on, do it privately. I'm not even going to ask you to come on and do it publicly. Send me a whisper at UNG714 that, hey, I don't abide by stopping Jewish students from going to campus. I don't abide by taking over buildings and demanding that the campus divest in Israel. And I don't abide universities being funded by Qatar or whatever their name is. I think it's Qatar. How do you spell a word with a Q and not have a U afterwards? I'll forgive Iraq, but that's a Q at the end of, forget about it. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. Thank you so much for watching. All 7 of you watching live, or whatever number of you watch this in the aftermath of my editing. And for now, just going to tell you, the boomer has blathered.